I wanted to say something about the Carmelo Anthony case, only because it is absolutely positively fascinating. And I have been, as you probably know, a lawyer for over 43 years. I was a former prosecutor, know a little bit about this, and want to discuss two different things with you. One was the verdict, why it makes complete and total sense, not because of race or any of the reasons that have been suggested, but also the reaction from some of the spectators, which is incoherent at best, and I'm being kind. Now, first, part one, the verdict in this case. Was this verdict correct? And I'm going to tell you the truth. If it wasn't, if you know me, if there's something wrong with this, I will tell you. But there's nothing wrong with the verdict. The verdict in the Carmelo Anthony case was not, despite what people say, a referendum on race or politics or public opinion. It was as straightforward as you can get. A straightforward, direct application of Texas law to a set of facts that the jury found persuasive beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, and to a degree of moral certainty, if you want to use that rather arcane language. 12 jurors were asked to answer one simple question. Now, before we do this, were they all black? No. There was an argument of whether there were 7 whites and Hispanic or Asian, but the argument is that there were no black jurors. And is that a problem? No, not at all. Unless there was the systematic exclusion of people from the jury because of race, and there was no allegation of that. The idea of the jury of your peers, I don't know where that came from. I don't know what that means. I don't know who his peers are, but it's one of those expressions that we always use. But the jury nonetheless had to answer a very, very simple question. Did the state of Texas prove beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that Carmelo Anthony, intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Austin Metcalf? And that's part one, and was his conduct legally justified as self-defense? So the answer was yes to number one, no to question number two. And after hearing all of the evidence, the jury who was there weighed all of the equities and the ideas that were alleged and proffered and averred. The answer to the first question, did they prove beyond a reasonable doubt, was yes. And the answer to the second question regarding was there an established case of self-defense that could negate this guilt, the answer is no. That's simple. Very, very simple. Now, the evidence that was presented at trial established that Mr. Anthony was present in a tent that was being used by another school's track team during some weather delay. And witnesses testified that he was repeatedly asked to leave. And rather than disengage, testimony indicated that he remained, exchanged words, made some threats, and was focusing this with those present, and this escalated into a greater confrontation. Now, according to the witnesses, again, who testified, he challenged others and made statements suggesting, inter alia, among other facts, that physical contact would have consequences. The jury was entitled to consider those statements when evaluating whether Mr. Anthony was acting defensively or was he provoking a confrontation. I think you know the answer to that. Now, under Texas law, self-defense is not available simply because a person is involved in some kind of a physical encounter. The law requires very, very simply that the use of deadly force be immediately necessary and that it meets deadly force. Deadly force. I knew him. Deadly force can only be used to answer deadly force. You can only use that amount of force which is equal to the amount of force used against you. But it also had to be immediately necessary and reasonable under the circumstances. And there's other things too. We also have the retreat doctrine. There's no stand your ground law. You just can't. I mean, if you can leave, you've got to leave. There are parameters. It's not what people think. Remember, Florida was different. Trayvon Martin was different because that was George Zimmerman. This was a stand your ground state. It was a different story. I don't want to go through the facts of that. But just as important to all of these, a person who provokes a confrontation may lose the protection of a self-defense claim when he was the one who brought this on, unless he clearly withdraws from the encounter, clearly, and communicates that withdrawal. So this is the retreat doctrine. I don't want to get too mucked and mired up in this, but the prosecution argued that Carmelo Anthony was the architect, in effect, of this confrontation. And the evidence suggested that he refused repeated requests to leave. And he remained where he was not wanted and escalated tensions rather than defusing them. And when Austin Metcalf ultimately pushed or physically attempted to move him, Carmelo Anthony, the jury found, responded by producing a knife and delivering a fatal stab wound to the chest. People were saying before, there was evidence that, well, you know, this knife is not illegal. What difference does that make? The knife is not illegal. Well, the scissors isn't illegal. An ice pick's not illegal. A steak knife's not illegal either. When you use it to kill somebody, it's a different story. Now, the law does not permit a person to respond to every unwanted touch, every untoward moment, or shove with deadly force. Jurors were instructed on the law and were entitled to determine whether a reasonable person in Carmelo Anthony's position would have believed that lethal force, this is the objective test, would a reasonable person believe that lethal force was immediately necessary? And based on the verdict, they concluded it was not. I mean, there's really not a whole lot to this. The physical evidence reinforced that conclusion repeatedly. The fatal wound was not accidental. The knife was real. It was deadly and intentionally used. And the injury was catastrophic. It struck a vital area of the body. I think it's called the heart. And jurors could reasonably infer intent from the nature of the weapon used and the location of the wound inflicted. It's one thing when you stab somebody in the leg. It's another thing when you go for this part of the chest. Now, the defense argued that Anthony acted in fear, that it was reasonable during a rapidly unfolding situation, and that he perceived a threat. Now, that argument was presented fully to the jury. They had the chance to understand it, and it was not ignored. It was considered and ultimately rejected by who? The jury. That is how trials work. The trier of fact. The fact that a defense is presented doesn't mean the jury is required to accept it or to agree with it. They just consider it. And they did, and they rejected it. And equally important in this case, there was no evidence that race in any way determined the outcome. I know people are going to disagree, as you'll see. Jurors do not deliberate based on race. They deliberate on testimony, on exhibits, on video evidence, and what the facts are presented. And physical evidence and legal instructions also play a role in this. And the record also reflects a case decided through the ordinary judicial process. The verdict was reached after the jury reviewed the facts. They applied Texas law and determined that the state had met its burden. That's it. End of discussion. Reasonable people may debate the sentence. That's fine. 35 years. Reasonable people may also debate the outcome, many of them who weren't there. And they may debate strategy and tactics or individual pieces of evidence. But what cannot be ignored is that the jury's ultimate duty, was to decide the case on the evidence presented in court. Period. That's it. And after hearing that evidence, the jury concluded that this was murder. not self-defense, murder. And the verdict reflects a legal judgment grounded in facts and law, and not race, not emotion, not public pressure or public opinion. Prosecutor Bill Wersky reminded the jury, very interesting, mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. Now, that's interesting. Of course, people will say, that's fantastic. That's great. End of case. No. I want you to listen to the reaction of this. And just, I'm not going to add anything more to it than I have to. First, I want to give you this. This is a piece from the New York Post. The New York Post had this, and this gives you kind of an idea of what the jury heard and what the jury thought and that which was presented.
Visibly shocked when the prosecution showed them graphic autopsy photos. If you haven't been following this story, Karmelo Anthony is the Texas teen on trial for the brutal murder of high school football star Austin Metcalf. Some of the jury members reportedly gasped. One woman put her hand over her mouth as pictures were displayed of Metcalf's body, showing a large stab wound in his chest, which punctured his heart. Metcalf's family had to leave the courtroom when the grisly pictures were shown, and the 19-year-old defendant apparently couldn't or wouldn't look at them.
I can't tell you what that means. It can be interpreted a million different ways, most probably indifferent.
His gaze was fixed on his lap. Anthony's defense lawyers began arguing their case on Monday, and the trial could wrap up by the end of the week. Prosecutors say Metcalf was slain after the teens fought during a track and field meet over, of all things, seating arrangements. Now, Anthony faces up to life in prison if he's convicted.
Now, fascinating, is it not? Now, the reactions. First, where would we be whenever the case came about, before or without the brilliance, the perspective of one Jasmine Crockett, who apparently was, I guess, looking at or perhaps reviewing another case.
Top of me and beating me down. I'm not limited to fist.
Now, I don't know what she's talking about. Of course, as you know, Jasmine sometimes talks from a different perspective, a different planet, a different realm. That's not what happened there at all. Well, listen to this.
I would argue that even the only time we go into things like people's hands being considered deadly weapons.
Again, I don't know what we're talking about. And notice her fingernails. And I must say something right now, which has nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing. But I hope that she uses a series of disinfectants and antibacterials after she uses the restroom, because those claws are nothing but petri dishes for anywho. And God forbid she picks her nose, she could sever an artery. But I digress.
It's typically like if they're a professional boxer or that kind of stuff. But I think by the time you start getting to like football player.
These are high school students.
Good argument. Good freaking argument. We're not talking about like the golfers. We're talking.
So this shove, what she's saying is that it was natural because that Carmelo Anthony was provoked and should have used the knife because Mr. Metcalf is so huge and he weighs 300 pounds. And of course, had him on the ground being pounded, which of course did not occur.
Talking about football players, right? Like this is what they are trained to do, is to inflict like serious physical contact.
As did Mr. Anthony with a knife.
And it's my understanding that the decedent was that.
The decedent. Interesting. Had to bring that one up. Isn't she delightful? Isn't she truly delightful? Now we get into the response. This from a woman who claims to be a prior or a former prosecutor. Listen to this and try to make out what she's saying.
That happened in here today.
We can't hear. All right.
I said, as a former prosecutor, this was a legal lynching that happened in this slaughterhouse. This is a slaughterhouse. This is not a courthouse. This courthouse is designed when you will come here and you look like us to slaughter you. That judge intentionally.
Okay. again, she missed a couple of points here. Number one, and this is critical, this was a jury trial. The judge, by virtue of the fact, has little to do with other than deciding which evidence comes in. It's up to the jury. And she's talking about this usual nonsense, which I think, as a former prosecutor, and I would imagine an officer of the court, I think she does a tremendous disservice to that which is going on. But then again, what do I know, right? What do I know? Now, let's talk about some of the more interesting reactions from the crowd, from people who were involved in this. Well, one of them, I think, is a woman who reminds me, that wonderful, that Samoan haka, or that war type of, that very impressive and intimidating type of stalking. This from a woman, and by the way, God forbid, let's see how good AI is to come up with captions for this, to try to interpret what some of the words are. I have no idea. Remember, these folks ostensibly are from our country and speak ostensibly English. Anyway, listen to this woman and watch her unique take on this, if you can understand it.
Where are y'all white people at? If you love Austin, you would be here. But because you don't care, it's funny than a motherfucker. Where's Austin's body?
Let me say something. I apologize for tender ears. This is what was said. I'm not countenancing this type of language. This is what was said. This was said.
No! I'm talking! Y'all don't love Austin! You don't care about Hunter! Because if you did, you would really stand in solidarity, not online, but right here! So I gotta speak for your white baby! I'll do it! I'll conjure that baby! And make sure he tells the real story! Bring your white people! I really want to see that support! Don't judge me! Because when I'm on, I'm on! It's okay!
What is that? What is that even? I don't even understand what it is. White babies. Again, it's just kind of a generic anger. Of course, racially motivated and racially based. Here is a woman who asks a very interesting question too. She asks, as a mother, what am I supposed to do?
I got 5 boys. I don't know what. I ain't got nothing to tell them no more.
Well, let me see. Let me ask you. What would you tell one of your 5 young, I would imagine young black children, males? What would you tell them? I've got it. Don't stab people. Don't carry knives. Don't stab somebody in an altercation where there's just pushing. It's called proportionality.
You can't walk away no more.
Rest in peace, Trayvon Martin.
Rest in peace, Trayvon Martin. We'll talk about that some other time if you'd like, because that, believe me, I predicted that one. This was stand your ground. This was anyway. I don't want to. I'm being lured into this, but if you're ever interested, let me know. I'll fill you in on those facts.
Let me ask you this right now. I hear.
Okay, so there you go. So this, again, frustration. I guess I understand. And listen, let's be fair. Just because people see the criminal justice system in a different way than you do does not mean that. Well, does not mean that they're wrong. Okay. Now this is a number of people talking at the same time. Again, showing a collective disputation, disagreement with the verdict and the sentence. But again, I'm not sure what they're saying.
Where the fuck is you saying?
They should have both been arrested.
They both should have been dead. The birth, both brothers. Both of them should have been dead. You ask me? Don't record me. I asked you not to record me.
The gentleman said they should have both been arrested. Arrested for what? Why would Austin Metcalf arrested for what? But here's the best one. This is the best one because this is almost pure performance. This shows a rage, which is almost kabuki-like. This is good. I don't know what she's saying, but it's good.
I'm glad you just said that. That's what Carmelo was doing. Protecting his motherfucking self.
He was protecting himself. See, so there you have it. So it goes to show you, again, we have a lot to worry about here. And I'm not about to tell you, I will tell you, my friend, as a defense lawyer, as well as a prosecutor, oh my God, I saw sometimes the police absolutely, not that often, but I've seen it before. I absolutely have seen it before. I am not going to tell you that the system is colorblind. I used to ask one time, why does, I don't know what the statistic is now, why is 14% of the population, well, adult males, what would that be? Representing 60 or so percent of the inmate population. Why? Why is there a disproportionate amount of black men in the system? One could say because it's unfair, or black men produce or perform a disproportionate amount of crime. It depends how you look at it. But understand, there's a lot to be said for this. There are problems with the system. I understand it. I'll be the first. But this, meanwhile, Tyler Robinson, now that's the case. Nobody's talking about him. I am. I will. Because he's not guilty. So what do you think, my friend? I ask you to do a couple of things. First, like this video. That sounds so weird. Like it. What is there to like? It's not the subject matter. You know what I mean? But like, But also, I've got some questions. What do you think? Give me your answer. And please, I'm looking for black, white, men, women. It doesn't really matter. What do you really think? This is America. And the last time I checked, free speech was still the ideal. It was the model. Tell me what you think. Comment as you see fit.